Hello, travelers, and welcome back to another episode of the Architect's Forge. In this episode, we're going to be starting our journey into the forces of the Feudom. And like we did with the Scions, we're going to start with what you get in the Song of the Dormant and beyond the Song of the Dormant bundle. So we will begin with the Feudom Guisarmiers, which is the blind troops for the Feudom. And as normal, we'll start with the lore. Now, the lore section for these guys is a bit shorter. We don't know much about them, aside from the fact that they are effectively levied peasants, but that they are still an adaptable and effective fighting force. The Feudom Guisarmiers are particularly useful in rugged and swampy terrain, and are known to fight to the point of exhaustion to defend their own. The Guisarmiers are always ready to fervently protect the flanks of the noble knights who join them on the battlefield, and they constitute the most orderly and effective defense of the Feudom Kingdom. Aside, of course, for the knightly orders of trained warriors. But with that little bit of lore out of the way, we'll proceed into the profile that they use on the table. But first, I'd like to just give a quick reminder that if you're enjoying this content or any of the other content on the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, follow, and subscribe. Help notify you when new videos are out, as well as helping other people find the channel, thanks to how the YouTube algorithm works. If you feel so inclined to help support the channel financially, you can always use the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below, or if you're ordering something directly from the Corvus Belli store, there is an affiliate link that if you use when purchasing from the Corvus Belli store, the channel gets a bit of a kickback. Any money is always just put into the channel to try and keep it going and, try and improve things. With that out of the way, let's jump into the profile for the Feudom Guisarmiers. The Guisarmiers are, as you'd expect, with the basic stats, low cost. They are the basic line infantry for the faction, so they have the relatively standard 20-point cost. They have a, they're on the slower side speed-wise with only a 3-2 move and a 9 stride charge, but this gets them in line with things like the Intact. A bit slower than something like the Bucklerman, but they're not, super slow. They're just on the lower side of average. Moving on, they have the standard average wounds of 2, and they have I'd say complicated, good whip, we'll say, of 2 yellow dice, and, the standard 1 morale. Now, just diving a little bit more into that 2 yellow dice whip, most line infantry that we see have a single orange willpower. Now, statistically, 1 orange is more likely to get a success than 2 yellow dice. Success on 1 orange is 62.5%, whereas getting a single success on 2 yellow dice is only 60.9. Now, while there is a trade-off of, a little bit less than 2% for getting a single success, where the 2 yellow dice really shines is in those situations where you need to get 2 successes. Now, is it likely that you'll get 2 successes on 2 yellow dice? No. To get 2 successes, you're looking at 14.1% chance. But it means that they have a shot to try and get the, pass a demoralization check when they're pushed up to 3 morale or 3 stress, or, if they're charged by something with intimidating 2, there's a chance that they just negate it all. Looking at something like the Spirit of Thermopolis spell in Northern Tribes, where if you fail it, you just immediately, the intimidation 2, you immediately demoralize. These guys at least have a shot. So in some ways, it's kind of nice to have the 2 yellow over the 1 orange, but it's dealer's choice. like other line infantry, they do have availability 3, and unlike, I think, a lot of line infantry and other factions, I think it's a lot more likely that you're going to be bringing more than one of these guys. Maybe not always 3, but 2 is definitely something you can expect to see. Moving on to keywords and abilities, they are human infantry. This matters for who can join them. There are a lot of guys in Feudom that can just join human infantry, so obviously these guys can be joined. They have a very succinct keyword line of just preferred terrain rugged. It's a very useful skill, helps you get around in that you won't be slowed by rugged terrain. So while they're only 3-2 move, it does mean they can ignore it. It also means they can charge through the rugged terrain, which if you're setting up positioning-wise nicely, you can set up behind a piece of rugged terrain. So if your opponent moves to the other side, you can charge through, whereas you don't need to worry about them charging you through it. Next, looking at their conquest, we see that they actually have 2 conquest in their full strength form, dropping down to 1. This is good. This is on par with Bucklerman, and we'll see that this gets even better with their passive abilities later on, making this unit very good at holding objectives. And they have 4 models in the unit, which is, as we see, is the standard for line infantry and most infantry units in the game. Moving on to their attack breakdown. First, at their full strength, we see that they get 2 red and 2 yellow dice, which averages 3 hits with a maximum 6. This is actually pretty good damage for line infantry, and for when you do spike, you do have a pretty high maximum damage, which is nice. You get an average of 2 1/4 specials, which makes it very easy to get that nice switch where for a single special you disarm the opponent. This makes it so they can be more defensive if they can get the attack off first, because it means that now when your opponent is attacking you, they will be losing a dice, making you survive better. Moving on to their degraded form, we see that their 2 red dice turn into 2 orange dice, dropping their average to only 2 hits and their maximum to 4. As we see units degrade, it's never nice, but this isn't the worst it could be. For a degraded profile, it's still fairly decent. You're probably not going to be doing a lot, though. Now, their average number of specials does go up to 2 3/4 approximately, but their switch does go to 2 specials, which means that while you're still, on average should get it, it's a lot less, I'd say, reliable than the in the full strength attack. That said, still pretty reliable. You're still likely disarming the opponent. Hopefully when you're degraded like this, it's later in the game and your opponent's also degraded, meaning that disarm's really going to hurt if their dice have already been reduced by being degraded. Moving on to that nice defensive profile, we see they have 2 blue and a built-in shield, which averages 2 blocks with a maximum of 3. It is always nice to have an automatic block because, an automatic block is better than a blue or black die, barring specials or switches, because it's guaranteed defense. We also see that they keep the same switch as their offensive profile, where a single special will disarm your opponent. That's not going to help you this time that you're attacked, but it does mean that if your opponent follows up the next time, they will have that reduced attack. This makes them fairly defensive. It's nothing special, but it's a fairly consistent defense. And with the special, the switch, which you do average getting one with the 2 blue die, makes it fairly reliable. And it means that, long-term in a grinding fight, these guys are pretty good at defending, which is what you want for that, high conquest unit that's sitting on an objective. Moving on to the degraded profile, we see that they lose that auto block, which will bring their average blocks down to 1 with only a maximum of 2. It's not great, but hey, hopefully your opponent's disarmed at this point. The average number of specials, of course, stays the same, which means you're still, fairly likely to get the the switch off and disarm your opponent. So that was the attack and defense breakdown. Let's look at the two skills, passive abilities that they have. So first, they have an ability called Emboldened by the Nobility. And this is a fairly simple one. If there's an allied noble unit within 7 strides of you, you get to add 1 to your conquest value. Nice and simple. Automatic just boost to conquest is very powerful. If that noble unit also has conquest, it just means you can really hold down a objective. Single noble nearby, and these guys are now suddenly 3 conquest at full strength. Now, a few things to note with this ability. It does not say that line of sight is not required, which means the unit does need to have line of sight to the noble unit, which just means you need to be careful with some positioning. Now, this ability, when we first saw it, with the Song of the Dormant, was good, but it meant that you'd need to have one of your nobles out of the unit. There was Verena, the High Command, who was going to be for sure out of units, but still, it was you need to have a noble exposed. But now, with things like the Foot Knights, who are a 4-strong defensive knight unit that is also noble, it makes it a lot easier to get this Emboldened by the Nobility off if you're pairing a Feudom Guisarmiers with something like a Foot Knight. As we always say, scoring wins games, so anything that's boosting conquest is automatically going to be pretty good. Now, the second and final passive ability that they have is Guisarmiers to ground. And what this allows you to do is when you would be pushed back, you can make a whip test. And if you succeed, you can avoid being pushed back without suffering stress. This is specifically in reference to the being pushed back part of a combat. It's not anytime you're pushed. So essentially this means instead of doing the normal thing of taking a stress to avoid being pushed back, which would be hard given their 1 morale, it allows them to just hold their ground by simply passing a willpower test. As we said before, 2 yellow dice, you have a 60.9% chance of getting a success and passing this willpower test and standing your ground, which means that this is a fairly reliable way to have the Guisarmiers stay and keep holding objectives. This ability to hold objectives and have your opponent not be able to just push you off an objective you're controlling by beating you in combat makes it so, again, with that high conquest, especially if it's boosted, you have a good chance of just being able to stay and hold and grind out against a lot of different enemies. This can get even better when you have a character attached that further boosts the willpower of Guisarmiers. So, yeah, they can be pretty good. A lot of attached characters bring in extra conquests. You could easily see these guys having 4 conquests sitting on an objective with, 2 yellow and, say, an orange, making it pretty guaranteed that they're going to hold their ground and not get pushed back. The other thing this does, it can help set up gang up bonuses, where because you aren't pushed back, now if one of your units charges into the unit that has been attacking the Guisarmiers, now you're going to get a nice gang up bonus. You're going to need to drop a automatic symbol or die, and it can really help you just put in the pressure and the damage. A lot of the things we're seeing with the Guisarmiers is that there's going to be a bunch of positioning that you're going to need to think about between where you're putting them on objectives to hold them, making sure that nobles are within line of sight and within 7, and otherwise just kind of supporting your more elite units by holding the ground that they take. But moving quickly on to the summarizing of that analysis, these guys are great for controlling objectives. Overall, I find that they are very reliable and consistent. They're not, the tankiest unit or tankiest line troop in the game. They don't hit the hardest. They're kind of good at both. They're very good at holding objectives. So maybe they won't survive as long as Bucklerman, but I think arguably they could actually hold the objectives longer. They are good on their own, but really some of the synergies I kind of started alluding to really get them boosted. In my mind, they are one of, if not the best line infantry of the game. So if you are looking at playing Feudom, or if you're playing Feudom and you haven't been running them, I definitely recommend trying them out. and getting 1 or 2 units of them on the field. For their low price, they are some of the best, one of the units best at holding objectives. So with that, that has been my review and analysis of Guisarmiers. I hope that you enjoyed it, and we'll be continuing on with more Feudom in the future as we work through all of the Song of the Dormant stuff. And then after that, we'll probably move on to another faction. Eventually, we'll get through the factions, and then we'll start jumping around, looking at specific units. If you do have specific units you want to see, I am also open to suggestions, so let me know in the comments below. So with that, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe. And this has been the Architect's Forge. May the dice forever be in your favor.